Hi, Pinner. How are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you, Gordon?
I'm really well. I'm really well. You've just come back from Turkey, haven't you?
I did indeed. I have indeed, yes.
Okay. Whenever something happens in the world, I like to speak to people who have been on the ground there and have seen, firsthand actually what's going on. So try and explain to me what led you to going there, and what you did, and in your own words, just explain to me the process of what happened when this massive earthquake hit in a country that is so dear to you.
Of course. So, I'm actually Turkish, but born in England. So, like most of the Turkish community in England, when we saw the earthquake and the devastation and how big it really was, um, I think I felt just as helpless as everybody else here that wanted to truly help. So, I got involved with all the drives to collect clothes and all of that stuff. But deep down, I wanted to do so much more. So, when an opportunity showed up, for me to be part of a team to drive aid directly into Turkey, I snapped it up. I'd already booked a week off work to try and get out there anyway to see what I could do to help. So the country's recommendation for aid coming in is to just drive into Istanbul and drop it in a central holding depot in Istanbul. But two of the drivers that was part of our team, Dedebe and Jumabe, were incredible. They had contacts between them and they managed to get us clearances after we unanimously agreed that we would like to go directly into the quake zone and see for ourselves what was needed, what was going on, and how we could be of more help.
So you have to get
So
clearance to go into the zone.
you do, because it's not safe. The roads have collapsed. There's buildings still half standing that are not being supported. So they are trying to keep the roads as clear as possible, to keep it clear for internal aid. There is a
Right.
huge amount of internal aid going there. Um, Trucks and trucks loads of grains and flour and pasta and you know, just all kinds of aid are going in through Turkey themselves. So obviously, with the sheer volume, the whole world has wanted to help. So the sheer volume of trucks going into
Yeah.
Turkey at the moment with aid, it would not be feasible or logical to allow them all to go into the quake zone. Um, the other issue is that there isn't very many big buildings that are structurally sound still standing. So the ones that are have all been commandeered by the government, by AFAD, by UPUP, and they're being used for multiple purposes actually. So one of the buildings we went to was a sugar factory to drop off our aid initially,
Okay.
which is a huge holding place. So while we was there, we were waiting for trucks that Turkey themselves were sending of bottled water, all kinds of essentials. So while they were unloading that, we were waiting, and then actually it was just too full. So they took us to a smaller holding depot near the actual, literally in the crisis zone of Marash. We went into Elbistan. That's where we decided to go after doing much research of where our aid would be the most needed. Our original plan was to try to get to Hatay, but Hatay was overwhelmed with aid because for the first few days initially, nobody could get into Hatay because the road in had collapsed so badly that there was no other way to get in there. So, there was sort of a hashtag Hatay, we're coming.
So were flights? Could they manage to get flights
No,
in there or anything?
no. It was literally, when you go in there, you have to kind of see it to believe it. The destruction is like nothing I've ever seen. It literally looks like there's been a war there and bombs have blown things up. It's the
It
fault
looks
line.
like it looks like a nuclear weapon has gone off. It looks just devastating. The whole place is
100%.
just
So, to give you an idea, as we were driving in, so a lot of people don't realize that Turkey can get so cold in certain areas.
Mhm.
Everybody thinks of Turkey as a hot, some holiday type country, but actually, the region that's been hit gets really cold. So, as we were driving in, um, it started off at -3 and it got to -7 the closer we got. Um, we stopped at a petrol station about an hour before Marash, I'd say. Um, and it looked like an apocalypse had taken place. There wasn't even a packet of chewing gum in this petrol station
Ah,
where everybody coming in is stopping. And, I needed to use the toilet quickly. And I ended up just helping a little old lady hold her coat so that it wouldn't touch anything in there. Because it was just, and, it's part and parcel of something like this, to be fair. Nobody's thinking about cleaning up after themselves. Everybody's just in a mad rush to get there
it
and
must
help.
be an absolute. Oh, I can't imagine.
So we didn't even realize initially to begin with, but at the petrol station sort of turned around and looked. And I think after a couple of minutes, realized that there was one building that had completely crumbled, with six others standing strong. So the depth kind of, that's when we were like, oh wow, we started to see evidence of the earthquake.
So
Um,
toilet facilities have been hit desperately then.
oh, I mean, in the crisis zone, originally what I was going to try start raising money for was for toilets,
Right.
because so I mean, what's happened is after the earthquake hit, a lot of people that survived it jumped in their cars with their women and children and took them away from the quake zone to
Okay.
family outside of it. They filled their cars up wherever they went with stuff that they thought would be useful and turned around and came straight back. So what you've got is a lot of men, a lot of aiders,
Rushing to
where,
get out of a disaster zone, and a lot of aiders rushing to get in,
yeah,
stopping off at facilities along the way.
yeah. So there is no, I mean, even in the kind of crisis zone, there's really only toilets left in the big buildings that they've commandeered, like the
Right.
school building and things like that. However, Turkey is now sorting those out. Now they are delivering purpose-built shower
Okay,
units and
that's good
toilet
news.
units. So that is happening. To be fair, I mean, going in, we didn't know what to expect. We were all very nervous. We There was snow blizzards we'd had to drive through. There was all kinds of stuff. So as a team, we kind of tried to stay quite jovial and act like it was all going to be all right. We was just going to go in and take the aid and have a look around, and it was all going to be okay. We were nervous wrecks. We didn't know what to expect really. One of the biggest things that I took away from going in there was the sheer volume of help that the Turks themselves are providing. So as we were driving into the actual central crisis zone that literally looked horrific, I mean, we couldn't even speak. We were just sort of looking around us, speechless at the devastation and the destruction. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason to the buildings that have fallen. Um, there's a lot of movement there, but one of the things that absolutely stood out was all different organizations and councils from all over Turkey had set up food stations. There was all kinds of food stations, so people were definitely not going hungry, number one. So that was a big relief. That
Okay.
was a huge relief seeing
Yeah.
that. Um, Also, oh gosh, it there were in the actual crisis zone, you've got the biggest kind of mobile phone provider, and they've got a crisis truck. So they've even set up phone points, phone charging points, internet points, computer access for the survivors. But what you've also got sort of going on with all of that is you have a huge amount of people that are just standing there in shock
Yeah. I
in
can
front of buildings that used to contain their whole lives, still trying to come to terms with it. Um, I had the opportunity to break away from my team and to take a walk, because that's what I wanted to do and talk to people. And I found that as soon as you sort of started any kind of a dialogue, these people were so full that they wanted to tell their stories. Um,
What did
and
they say?
they were so humble. Like, it gives you real perspective. So there was one gentleman, his hand was bandaged, and I said, "Oh, what have you done to your hand?" And he said, "I genuinely don't remember." He said, "I saved my life with about 3 or 4 seconds to spare." And I said, "Oh, how? Like, what happened?" And he said that his house was now gone. He said that basically he'd had to jump off the second story balcony to save himself. And I mean, I commended him for sort of standing and being able to walk. And he said, "Oh no, my knees are really hurt." But he went on to explain something that we never really think about, which was he said he never thought he was going to be able to get off that balcony. It was his third attempt. The buildings were shaking so absolutely violently that they were holding their
You had to
residents
try three
prisoner.
times to jump off a building.
He tried 3 times to get it, took 3 attempts to get to his balcony. So the buildings literally held them prisoner. They were shaking so violently that twice he made it to his balcony and got thrown straight back into the middle of his apartment. And the third time, you can just picture them
Ah,
fighting with all of their might to get to windows and doors to be able to throw themselves clear of these buildings. Until I had that conversation with him, I never even thought about it. And what he said was the third time he got to the balcony, he still couldn't get himself over the edge because of the violence of the shaking. And he said that there was a window of about maybe 2 to 3 seconds where it just all went still. And he managed to jump. But as he jumped, the building started coming down. And I think personally that's how he hurt his hands, because he described, I
mm,
mean, with his hands, he said, I had to put my hands above my head as the dust and rubble came down. And he said, for the love of God, there was another 3 or 4 second window where it just went still, and he managed to run clear of the building. Um, the thing that I've noticed about these people is they're very eerily calm. I think there's a lot of adrenaline and shock still involved.
mm.
They're not walking around crying and boo-hooing or feeling sorry for themselves. They are literally holding their composure so unbelievably well in such a traumatic, I mean, there is no words to describe what they've been through and what they are now stuck in. Um, I mean, one of the things that I've taken away is kind of snowballed. What started off as just me helping to drive some aid out, and maybe have a look and try and sort of update people in the UK of what was going on, because I knew there's thousands of people wanting to help over here and not knowing how. And the communication between the kind of disaster zones and the outside world isn't that clear. Um, when they're asking for the aid, by the time we're sorting that aid out logistically to get there, those aid needs have been now covered.
Yeah.
With our journey with 4 drivers and no real stops was a 9-day round trip. To give kind of an idea, it was around 2,000 kilometers to get to the border of Turkey, but it was another 1,000 kilometers to get to the quake disaster zone
How
from
many
the
countries did
Bulgarian
you have to
border.
go through on the way there then?
We did, in total, we did 8 European countries.
Was there any problem at passport
There was
control or any? What
absolutely.
happened?
So most countries were absolutely fine. Bulgaria was not the best. The, in fact, it made me really angry, and I had to really bite my tongue. But the customs
You
officer
don't need to there. You can tell your
at,
story here.
Bulgaria um, was very much agitated by the amount of hard work the earthquake had made them. And
Oh,
his words were, next time Turkey has an earthquake, they need to set up an emergency corridor because, we're so tired. He basically, the 2 drivers that he initially spoke in Turkish. So he was very much hinting that he wasn't going to let us through because our aid didn't have the weights. We had a list of what we was carrying, but not the weights of it. So he kept saying, "This paper is toilet roll. It's toilet roll. It's nothing. Let me show you." When I came out and tried to appeal to his better nature, and he just kept saying to me, "This is my job. This is my job. You don't know what you're talking about. This is my job." I was trying to say, have a heart. We've just been through
yeah, I can
X
imagine.
amount of countries with no issues. This is our final border before we make it to where we want to go. His whole real purpose was that he wanted something to line his palm. He wanted a little handout. Um, the aid trip that I went with was organised by a county councillor of Hertfordshire, Jeff
Okay.
Jones. And
Shout
so
out
I
to
said,
Jeff Jones.
Jeff Jones, yeah, shout out to him. He so basically I said, Jeff, come on, you and me, let's go out. We'll speak just in English. And because we did that, he then didn't have the heart to ask for a bribe. he sort of played really hardball with us. And then he said, you know, because I have children, I'm going to let you pass
Okay.
and
Thank you.
let us
Thank you
pass.
so much for that. That's really humane of you. Well done.
You know, it's
Wow.
just, yeah, yeah. And you have to stay really, really calm.
Yeah, because the slightest thing they can just
You
use.
know, and you know, it's part and parcel of it. It's part and parcel of it. The rest of the countries we went through were absolutely brilliant. You know, just small little hiccups. Serbia decided that we were HGV, even though we were a minibus with a trailer. So we then had to go and get some paperwork to turn us into a HGV, which then caused us a whole host of problems going through other borders because we had HGV paperwork. So they were now turning us out of the kind of the personal car lanes and making us go back in via HGV lanes, which were really busy, obviously because of aid. You know, so nothing major, no major problems. A lot of the people along the way were just like, wow, you know, aid. I don't even remember which country it was that we got stopped in. We got stopped somewhere. And literally, the moment we showed them the sign that we're going UK to Turkey for humanitarian aid, they literally went, go, 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 go. Don't stop.
Oh,
Keep
that's
going, you know.
fantastic.
And it was just like, yes, you know. So lots of, you know, there's nothing like a disaster to bring out the best and the worst of humanity, unfortunately. There's people that are there to take advantage of situations like this, and there are people there that will literally give up everything to help. So,
It's important to remember what you said earlier about the thing that really you were shocked by almost, and it really surprised you was the amount of help that there were over there. It's important to remember that there are far more good people in this world than there are bastards.
a
And
thousand
it
percent,
really is that it really is the case.
1,000%. I mean, when we went to unload our aid off, the part where we were, so although it was an AFAD issue official that was managing them, they were all volunteers who had survived the earthquake. They had no time to decompress, to understand what had even happened. I mean, their stories. I didn't have the heart to film any of them or ask that could I, because they were just speaking from their hearts. And you were talking about men that had got up and fought the violence of the quake to throw themselves over their kids and wives to keep them safe. And once the shaking stopped, put them in a car and drove them out and turned around and came straight back. And they were sleeping on cardboard pieces for mattresses in a building with no electric, no heating, working from 6:30 in the morning till 2 in the morning every single day, just sorting out all the internal aid that was coming in. So
How many people do you know have died now in total?
the official numbers are somewhere over 40,000. We, my personal opinion is that that number is probably very lowballed. I don't think, to be fair, they have a real understanding of how many people or how many dead are still under the rubble. I think it's such a huge event over such a huge region that there isn't a clear cut way of them knowing the real numbers yet. So I think that the numbers so far are sort of counting bodies recovered rather than anything too accurate. I know that in Marash, where we were, there was definitely still bodies underneath the rubble. A lot of the buildings, because Marash was one of the first places that aid got to, because the road in there wasn't completely, you know, annihilated by the quake. So the cleanup operation had already begun. There was already massive bulldozers and all sorts picking up the rubble of the buildings that had been cleared of bodies and of any more remaining, you know, possible survivors. So I know further down, you know, when you got to Gaziantep and Hatay, they were still looking for bodies and, you know, survivors, and they were still finding survivors, which was absolutely heartbreaking because, you know, what you can imagine is how many people held on to life with both hands, you know, for 3 days, for 5 days, for 8 days, because on day 10, they were still putting survivors out that had had no food, no drink. I mean, that in itself is really heartbreaking. Um,
My family
yeah,
are my wife's side of my family are Turkish Cypriot, and my father-in-law has the apparently has the Turkish news on because obviously you're not really seeing much about it over the news over here,
it's
and
everywhere.
and the wife says they're crying all the time. They're just crying all the time. There's stories of women, pregnant women who have been pulled out the rubble dead and delivered the baby alive.
Yep, yep.
There's stories coming out that just melt your heart. And just to, how many people did you say then? 40 something, 41,000, did you say?
No, I think it was over that actually. I think last time I checked,
Just to,
it was
just to put this into some sort of, context for people. Do you remember the Thai tsunami a few years ago?
yes.
That devastation happened. That killed 4,812, according to a quick search.
Wow. Wow, yeah.
That's the level of devastation we're talking about here on a global scale. And it's I can't imagine what it's like.
Yeah.
So there's a
So,
GoFundMe. What
so
are you what
basically,
you're going back there as well, aren't you? Tell me
I'm going
what
back.
you need to take first. What do you get, what
Right.
are they in need of?
So basically, what happened was I am in a lot of Turkish community groups, British Turkish community groups. So although I only went with the intention of just driving some aid out and coming back, while I was out there, I decided to obviously speak for the people really, and all these people sort of crying out in England saying, "How can we help?" So they were still trying to donate clothes. So I went in the group and I was like, "Listen, they need no more clothes. They have enough clothes. They are really well fed. There is food everywhere. There is literally, big Turkish companies have sent their workers down on food stations and the but what there isn't is a lot of people haven't got somewhere to put their head down. That's the biggest issue. The only thing that they were still screaming out for were tents, blankets, and sleeping bags.
Yeah.
That is the biggest thing. What you've got is a lot of the safe spaces, like the third floor of the school and things like that, have been given to families with children. But what you have got is a lot of the vulnerable and the elderly out in the streets, in shock, full of adrenaline, just with nowhere to go and not wanting to ask because they're too humble. So, everyone I spoke to, one of my questions was, where are you sleeping at night? Now, bear in mind, it's -7 at 2 in the afternoon. I have 7 layers on, you know, it hurts to breathe, it's so cold. It was a real feel of -15. So that was my real kind of, where are you sleeping? And they all unanimously came with the same answer, which was nowhere. What they're doing is so people are setting fires up with wood coming out of the rubble, which has got nothing but toxic smoke because these pieces of wood have been varnished and painted and all sorts. They're running towards those fires in oil drums to warm up their hands. And then there's some bits of furniture that have been pulled out of some of the devastated buildings. There's random couches and stuff. And they're just sort of putting their heads down for 10, 15 minutes here and there, and having some kind of a snooze, for want of a
So
better word.
are you taking tents and what have you back out with you on? Is it Thursday?
So so I basically got really lucky in that because of me going over there, I made some really good contacts up there. So I am now working in conjunction with AFAD, with Up, and another charity who is setting up tent cities. So basically, there is a lot of people already doing this and bigger charities. The problem is the need is too high. There isn't enough. When we said we had tents on board our aid bus, they were literally biting at the bit, for those tents more than anything else. They were quite disappointed with baby milk and baby nappies, and they were like, we don't need it.
There
We
you
have
go. If you want to help, tents, sleeping bags, places, things to keep warm. It's really cold over there.
you need to kind of realize that most women and children have been removed, except sort of just a handful in the villages surrounding that don't have family elsewhere to go to. So at the moment, most of the aid that has gone out, a lot of it is actually hindering them because they have now filled up spaces that they need to fill up with grains and pastas and rice and sugar and
Right.
tea and, with 1,000 packets of nappies, probably more than 1,000 from what I saw, and this is just in one depot. We went to multiple and it was the same story across the board. They all tried to throw 15 pairs of warm gloves into our minibus for us. And we were like, no, no, no. And they were saying, we literally have about 35 pairs of gloves per survivor.
Where is that going to end up? It's not going to end up
So
with
if
the
I'm
people that need it, is it?
if I'm completely honest, I think it's all going to end up getting banned to keep the people warm because the bigger need is they're freezing. People are getting
Well, at
frostbite.
least it's going to be useful in a way. I mean,
Absolutely. I know that. See, this is another reason I wanted to go because there was a lot of conflicting news. My mum happened to be in Istanbul when this was going on. She still is, to be fair. And when I told her what I was doing, she was like, "Pinna, do not get involved in the clothes. They're burning the clothes. They don't want the clothes. There is just so many truckloads of clothes coming in. They do not want it. They want tents, blankets, and sleeping bags. The
tent,
blankets, the blankets, because the people that are sleeping rough, there's so much snow that the snow is melting while they sleep. The blankets are getting cold, and then in conditions that are not coming above zero, the blankets are rendered useless because the water then freezes on them, and there's no way of drying them back out. So it's a massive problem, you know. So basically, I got put into contact with a gentleman who is getting tents manufactured. I mean, these are not normal tents at all. I've got a little video clip that I'll send you over, Gordon, that maybe we can tack onto this.
please too.
And they're 4 meters squared with very heavy duty. They're like Sherpa huts, so appropriate material for the temperatures. They have fittings in there to hold a little wood burner stove to keep it warm inside. They have windows that open with insect meshes to circulate air. And the same people that are doing this, I mean, they're absolutely amazing. So what they've done is they have taken enough donations to furnish them out, to put the blankets in them, the stoves for them. They've set up purpose-built toilet and shower units to go in the tent cities that they're building. And one of the things that absolutely made my heart sing actually is they've thought about the children as well. And they've created an extra large tent and they've taken a generator as a donation to set up a safe space for the children with a TV screen and just some normality, some tables, colouring in books, just for the kids to get away. Um, One of the reasons I really wanted to be behind this kind of movement for tents is because at the moment, a lot of these men and elderly and vulnerable are standing there in shock with adrenaline holding them up. And there is going to be a crash and burn. And there's nowhere for them to crash and burn, number one. And number two, there is literally no space for them to hide from the destruction of once what was their neighborhood, which was, their neighbors that they've loved have died. There's no getting away from it for them. So at least with the tents, somewhere to be warm, to sleep, to be safe, and just to get away from the horrors, and start to decompress and maybe process what's going on. It's really heartbreaking. And the worst part is when I was speaking to these people, have an accent on my Turkish, obviously, because I was born and raised here, and they would say, why are you here? And when I'd say, oh, I've come from England as part of the team driving aid in, the thing that absolutely initially broke my heart, but then gave me the strength to do what I'm now doing, was they were like, wow, you've come all this way for us. What can I get you? What do you need? And they're standing there in clothes that weren't even theirs to begin with. These people have jumped out of buildings, probably in, whatever it was that they were in their heart. They did not have those coats on. They did not have those woolly hats, and now what they're standing in on. So nothing. These people literally have nothing. And they were trying to look after me for coming to help. The hospitality, I mean, a lot of people go to Turkey on summer holidays, and one of the things that they will always come back and say is just how hospitable the
Yeah.
Turks are. And even in this devastating situation that, nobody should have to go through, they were still expressing that hospitality to us. I mean, it's just amazing, absolutely amazing.
And at the other end of the scale, there's the government and the way the government reacts to this. I did a quick Google search before a quick search before. The UK government have sent, according to this website, £25 million in aid.
Yes.
There it is. The 25 million in new overseas aids will fund additional emergency relief, such as tents and blankets. That's great. 25 million. So they've said 25 million in tents and blankets. On the other end of the scale, though, Pinner, here's the military assistance to Ukraine. The US is the largest provider. The UK is the second largest donor, 2.3 billion they've sent in military assistance. They've sent 2.3 billion in military assistance to what I believe is a proxy war in Ukraine, and they've promised to match that as well in 2023. So that's 5 billion basically they've pledged to war in Ukraine, and 25 million to these thousands of people in Turkey who, it's great that they've sent that much, 25 million in, and they've sent it in tents and blankets, which you say is really needed. But I just want to explain to people the difference here, and where I believe the focus of our governments is always in the wrong direction. Look at this. People don't realize the difference between a million, and we've sent 25 million in blankets and whatever, and a billion, and we're about to send another 2.3, 2.5 billion in arms. The difference between a million and a billion is 1 million seconds is 11 and a half days, and 1 billion seconds is 31 and a half years. That's the difference in disparity between us and our government going to bomb people and fight a needless war and to save people's lives who desperately need it. And as great as it is, all the stories of wonderful compassion from people that I hear from you, Pina, I'm just as disgusted at the fact that our governments just seem to want more death and destruction rather than actually helping people who desperately need it.
So, I mean, I have got zero political agenda in this. Zero.
I'm not expecting you to. I'm just
Yeah,
making a point. Look at
of
look
course,
at look at this.
of course.
25 million compared to 5 billion. This is disgusting.
So again, I have no political agenda, and actually, the we've teamed up actually with the charity Humanitarian Aid Fund in Great Britain, who have an amazing track record of being able to get into disaster zones quicker than the bigger charities and the big organizations that have collected millions. There's so much red tape governing that money that it can't go in and help quick enough.
And
But
where does it go? These bigger organisations. Where does it go? Because I see some of the charity the CEO's salary of these so-called charities, and they're getting £500,000
I
a year.
I honestly cannot speak for them, and I don't know. I mean, I was one that originally, when this happened, donated some money originally to the Red Cross, because the Red Cross have been around forever and it's a trustable, reputable charity.
Yeah.
But to be fair, when I was walking around in the quake zone, the Red Cross was nowhere to be seen. So I think what happens is a lot of these kind of millions and millions of pounds that are collected are going to come into play a little bit later, which is why I have decided to try and take action and get immediate relief,
They
you
need
know,
it
of
now.
course. So they will put that money hopefully into real building infrastructure, schools, medical. I know there's field hospitals. Hospitals have fallen down. I know that there is, while we were going in, there was
Okay.
absolutely truckloads of, as I say, grains and stuff like that going in. So the money has got to be paying for that. Somebody's money's paying for that. So I can't speak for them. I mean, the reason we set up the GoFundMe page, and I am working, as I say, with Humanitarian Aid Fund in Great Britain, and a lovely lady called Layla Forward who's put me in contact with them. Um, our kind of angle on this is, you can see every single penny that we have raised is going to go into these tents.
How
Personally,
much? How much is each tent? How much is
right,
each
so
one?
each tent is with the exchange rate, it's roughly £295 per
Okay.
tent. So there's 20 at this present moment with who I'm working with. There was 25 tents already made and manufactured and ready to go. What happened was, a lot of Turkish businessmen and internal people have said, yes, I'll have 25 tents, I'll pay for those, I'll pay for 50, put deposits down, and then not come through because they've put the money in other places and into other charities and other organizations, because nobody really knows what to. All they know is they want to help, and
Hmm.
there's no real clear cut direction for them to take.
Okay, so
So
295 pays for a tent.
one tent, yeah.
And that helps,
So
I
so
assume, a family.
so that will home a family of four absolutely easy. I mean, they're 4 meters by 4, which is bigger than most people's living rooms, to be fair.
How many people have been rendered homeless as a result of this earthquake? I
So
mean,
I've read really varying numbers, and I'm not too sure what to believe. But I mean, the numbers are from 1.7 million right up to sort of 2 to 3 million. Um, so I literally have no idea. Is my honest answer. There's no clear cut answer to that, I'm afraid. But as I say, from what I've seen with my eyes, it's the tents and the warm, safe spaces that need to be provided. And although there is a lot of it going on, it's not enough. It's not enough. It's definitely not enough. You know, they are just screaming out for it. So this is what we're doing. And obviously the cold weather conditions is hindering them. I mean, people have actually been dying of the cold. People that survived the earthquake have died of the cold, you know, and it's and they're trying, you know.
Come on, UK government, 100 million. Come on.
As I say, I have no political agenda, but one thing I will say is I know that there has been a lot of kind of mixed news over the Turkish news, over even the sort of Turkish government's response and stuff. My personal opinion from what I saw was the response was actually amazing. I think I said it at the beginning of this interview. You know,
You
one of
did.
the things that really stood out to me was the sheer volume of Turkish people that were there to help. Some of these people have come from parts of Turkey where they've never seen snow in their lives. And when they got there, they slept rough for 2, 3, 4 nights, you know, helping the aid. Most of them were sick with colds and flus and runny noses and and one of the guys was like, look, Habla, and his fingernail blackened with frostbite and but still going, not stopping. Um, we met a team of 6 guys at a petrol station. I mean, they were incredible. They worked for a massive supermarket over in Turkey, and the owner of the supermarket had basically commandeered a huge building in Gaziantep, one of the worst hit places, and he was sending 2 truckloads in every day. And these 6 lads with their personal cars were out from 6 in the morning till 2 in the morning delivering 10,000 hot meals. I've always wanted a neck warm and I didn't have time to buy one, and they gave me one, and I kept saying, no, I don't want it. There's people that need it.
Yeah.
And he said, Upload, we give out 10,000 of these a day. My boss, that is what he's sending. Our warehouse is full. We are out delivering in all of the villages, not, as well as the main towns. And he said, there is nowhere we don't go into. Hatay, Gaziantep, Sakarya, everywhere, Elbistan. And it just, the response and the effort sort of across the board of Turkey is actually
And
phenomenal.
I mean, there's still earthquakes going on right now, isn't there? Almost, it's not like
So,
I hear about another tremor every day, almost.
so yeah, so although they keep sort of saying it's another earthquake, unfortunately they are aftershocks. So there is a scale that the kind of earthquakes work to with aftershocks. So because of the kind of the size of the biggest earthquake, which is 7.8,
Yeah.
um, unfortunately they can still have aftershocks right up to 7. And that would still be an aftershock. There's kind of this there's a I'm not a geologist, but I've
Richter
kind of done a little
scale.
bit of research, yeah.
The
And so
Richter
I
scale,
believe
they call it.
so actually it's not the Richter scale. Once it goes off or up, so
It goes
although
to a different one when it comes to the aftershocks. Then.
the motion, no. So even the earthquake, it's not the Richter scale.
Oh
So
right.
anything over 5, the Richter scale is a little bit inaccurate. So it's something like, do you know, I've been trying to memorize this and I've looked it up about 10 times and I still keep forgetting. It's something like the motion movement scale or the, yeah, you need to look that one
I'm
up.
going to have to look up to this. I think because my whole life I've thought earthquakes
Yeah.
were the Richter
So,
scale, and
so
now
Richter scale was actually devised in 1925. So they found that it,
35,
pardon, 1935, sorry, yeah.
1935.
And so what they have found is that once the earthquakes start going over 5, or 5.5, I think it was, the Richter scale suddenly becomes a little bit not redundant, but it doesn't actually portray the real violence and magnitude
Oh right, okay.
of,
So once it
of
goes over five
an
point five, it doesn't because
additional.
the difference between a 5 and a 6 is like 100 times magnitude, isn't it?
Oh,
And
listen, I mean,
and then a
the
six to the
difference.
set, and that's what. And I don't think like to say. I think what they're saying is to say it was a 5 on the Richter scale, and then you to say it's a 6 on the Richter scale. A 6 doesn't give you the right thought because a 6 is 100 times worse or 10 times worse than a 5, and then a 7 is 10 times worse than that. So I think
Absolutely,
that's what they're
absolutely,
trying
because
to
I
say with
think
that.
people people don't even realize the difference from just between the 7 to 7.3 to the 7.8. The actual vastness of the differences on that are huge. And also, so one of the things that people don't realize is the reason why. So, you know, you've got countries like Japan that are very seismic. So people are kind of trying to compare it. But the issue is that the fault line that runs through Turkey is one of the shallowest in the world, which makes it the deadliest.
Yeah.
So the fault
Okay.
lines that run under Japan are roughly between 35 and 39 kilometers underground. Unfortunately, the fault line under Turkey is only 17 to 18 kilometers underground. Massive
Which
difference.
means much more devastation, much more
Which,
buildings, you know, and
correct.
obviously, and in Japan, I think they've got building regulations for Turkey. I mean, you know, and the buildings are just falling down like paper almost. I've seen videos where it's ridiculous.
There's no rhyme or reason to the way that the buildings have fallen, but because of it being so shallow, there's no way for that much violence and energy to dissipate before it hits the surface. So I took my own personal photographs, and honestly, it's mind blowing the unnatural angles that these buildings are tilted towards, and you know some of the buildings that I took photos of, they kind of blow your mind because you think you're looking at a three-story building that was relatively unscathed, but then when you kind of look at the finer details, what you're actually looking at is the top three floors of a seven-story building,
With 4 stories buried
and
underneath.
dust, absolute dust, and those top three still look like they're intact. They've barely got a crack in them. You know, the way that buildings have come down is just, I've always been quite good at vocalizing, and I don't even think I could find the words to describe the actual destruction that we witnessed. Like, I don't think I'll ever be able to find the words, to be fair. So what we've decided to do is to bypass all these kind of bigger charities with all the red tape and everything that holds them back and delays aid going in and the funding going in. And we've decided to do it ourselves. We're teaming up with, as I say, the smaller charity of humanitarian aid funding in Great Britain, who, I mean, even with the GoFundMe, normally it takes 30 days for GoFundMe to release funds, but they've kindly said that we will front all of those funds so
Yeah,
that
good
you've
on
got
you.
it to hand. You know, obviously, one of the most important things is to go through the right channels and to make sure that none of this money isn't going anywhere outside of these tents, you know, and nobody's
Yeah,
taking a part and nobody. So I mean, I'm self-funding.
yeah.
I'm paying for my own tickets, my own accommodation, everything, and my and I'm going to be photo documenting. So I'm basically going to pick those tents up from the manufacturer. I will be escorting them to Hatay, which is the region that's been back in the news in the last 2 days with the massive aftershocks that have been over six. So that's the actual region we're taking them into, to this purpose-built tent city where they have already provided a kitchen tent, shower units, toilet units, as I say, and a generator. They are trying to set up more of these. Our original plan was there's 25 tents that was available to us. We have only raised the funds for 10
Okay.
so far.
Let's try
But,
and get you to
but
25 then. Come on.
you
Share
know,
this as widely as you can, people.
what we want is to basically set up these safe little communities so that families can now be kept together, children and parents can be kept together, neighbours can be put back together so that they can all comfort each other. At the moment, from what I saw, a lot of people are processing this in their own little worlds on their own. You know, they're just
Yeah,
standing there.
family and company and camaraderie is really important, I can imagine, at this time for them.
100%, 100%. They are literally sort of, everybody's so in shock
They need
that
to
they're just
create
sort of
communities and
correct. And that is exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to set these little communities up where they can all comfort each other, be with each other, love each other, and grieve their losses. You
yeah,
know, the other major problem is that because they have nowhere to go and they're so shell shocked, they're still standing in front of buildings that haven't fully come down. And there are aftershocks after aftershocks. The day that we went into Elbistan, into Malash, there was four aftershocks ranging between 4.2 and 4.7. Now, there are whole buildings that are 6 story high that are literally tilted at 45 to
how do you
90
move
degrees
on though
angle.
if you know you've got loved ones buried underneath the rubble? How can you move? I couldn't leave. I couldn't.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's Yes, it's really, really hard. And that's the thing as well. And they're not thinking of themselves at all. I think there's a lot of guilt as well. You know, it's human nature to feel guilt over things that aren't even our fault. You know, there's a lot of people that own those buildings that have their tenants have died in them, and they're just sort of standing there feeling like it was on them, and it's not on them. You know, it's just it's huge. It's huge, and it's just they need safe spaces. They need safe, warm spaces to be able to decompress and deal with this trauma. But at the moment, it's just there in their faces. It's there's no getting away from it. There's nowhere to hide. It's
Okay,
not
so
even a
we
topic.
need a way to try and create something to shield them from this just devastation, and to create some sort of community and normality, and get and kickstart their lives again. And just thanks so much for what you're doing, Peanut. I'm really, really, really thankful to what you're doing, for what you're doing, and
You know,
everybody who is helping over there. And I know you've said that there's so many.
as I say, what started off as just something as me going out to drive a bit of aid out there has turned into something huge. I mean, thank you to Layla, who kind of was like, you know, all this information you're feeding us back from the quake zone is invaluable. And it suddenly started opening everyone's eyes. As I say, I'm at a little bit of an advantage in that I now am in constant contact with a senior AFAD official and somebody that works with Up as well as Ismail Hilmi, who is helping us with these tents. And so I am constantly on current news on their needs, you know. So I would say my biggest message right now as well is you have to stop sending in clothes and baby products. You have to,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it's
yeah.
really
It's very well meaning, but it's
people,
we need warm spaces for them. Correct?
but it's holding them back because what's happening is they are going through those aid trucks to see if they can just take out the 20 or 25 blankets in there because they need those
Which
and
is
they need
time
the
consuming and
yeah,
manpower as
yeah,
well.
100%. 100%. They need the 20 or 30 sleeping bags in there, and they need the kind of sanitary products and soaps and toothpaste and things like that as well, to be fair. But there is so much clothes that the sheer manpower to go through that stuff to find what they really need. And as I say, the clothes are now starting to go in landfills in Istanbul. They're starting to truck them out and landfill them and burn them. And it's the amount of money that is going in as well logistically to get this aid there
Yeah,
that isn't needed could be put into these
and
tents.
it's like it's well meaning effort, but it's wasted effort at the
Oh,
end of the day, isn't it?
100%. Don't get me wrong. Before I drove the aid in and looked with my own eyes,
Yeah,
I was doing the same. I was doing the same. I volunteered the day before to help an organisation. I mean, I think it was 8 truckloads of donations that we sorted through. There was about 200 volunteers there that day. But all of that, it kind of breaks my heart because it's no longer needed, you know. And as I say, the Turkish companies themselves are sending in truckloads of brand new clothes, fleecy pajamas and warm jumpers and coats, and you know they are taking their own.
but
This is a little bit different than Ukraine because obviously Ukraine, it was a nationwide issue, but people kind of don't realize sometimes how big Turkey really is. So it's a region of Turkey, and the rest of Turkey is trying to look after that region as much as they humanly and possibly can. As I say, we have everything to go inside the tents, but it's the tents
yeah,
themselves.
but I mean, millions of homes. You've got it's millions of homes here,
Yeah,
and you
yeah,
know, if you're saying you're saying to people where are you sleeping, and they're saying nowhere, it means that basically, as soon as they wake up as soon as they open their eyes, if they catch 10 minutes, they're greeted by the horror of what they've been through straight away. So at least I can imagine being inside somewhere warm with a tent. It's shielding them from the horror of the disaster, and they can start to heal.
100%. And the tent cities are being kind of built up around in flat areas that wasn't affected, you know, where the ground hasn't cracked, the fault line hasn't sort of smashed the earth to pieces. So they know they'll be safe there. And it's away from the destruction, it's away from all of the death and the smell of death. And, you know, and this is what they need. They really do need this, you know. And I mean, just to give you a kind of example, so we're getting a lot of people saying, well, I donated to Up, you know, which is the massive Turkish charity out there that's working hand in hand with AFAD. But to give you some kind of idea, you know, Up have just done a recent update saying, you know, 5,000, 2 lots of 5,000 tent cities have been set up in Hatay, you know, by Up. But it's a drop in the ocean.
Yeah,
10,000 tents
10,000 when you've got
is a
millions of
drop
homes.
is a drop in the ocean. So, I mean, the number of buildings that have fallen down is also debatable. The numbers vary hugely depending on who you're listening to. From 11,000 buildings have dropped to somewhere near as 60,000 buildings have dropped.
Wow.
Another thing that you've got as well is you've got, you know, in Turkey, they don't have the same kind of planning structure as us. So you have a lot of tall buildings next to shorter buildings and so on and so forth. So what you've had is as they're swaying, the bigger buildings have knocked the smaller buildings around, and so the buildings themselves have annihilated each other. You know, so even if buildings weren't going to fall and would have stood up, the buildings next to it have beat it down and made it drop. You know, it's not just sort of, you know, there's a lot of kind of talk about planning and this and bad building, but actually there is so many factors. There's a lot of buildings where the shopkeepers below cut supporting columns without telling anyone. A lot,
Yeah, I've heard
a
of this.
lot.
And there's obviously whenever this comes up as well. I mean, even I wanted to make it political. You know, I wanted to
No,
get on my political horse. Obviously, politics and people involved in politics have their agendas too. But I mean, if you're saying that the violence is it's going to be years until you really find out what's gone on there. Let's just really not
everyone there,
concentrate on that and concentrate on helping these people as much as
100%.
possible. You know.
I only literally have a humanitarian kind of purpose in this. You know, it's for the people. I walked around and all I had to give them after I listened to them was a hug, you know, and I hugged each and every one of them. And they're so full. It was the only time that really there was a few of them that sort of choked in my shoulder, you know, and they still kept their composures and they still blessed me for coming to help, you know, and it just, which is why now, you know, anything that is within my power, I will now do to give as many warm beds and safe spaces to these people because they deserve it. They deserve it. Nobody deserves to be, you know, not only to have lived through what they've lived through, but now in the after consequences of it all, you know, the not being able to get away from it, you know, and everybody is scrambling. There's a lot of organisations to say scrambling around trying to help, but it's not enough. It's not enough. So
Well, with people like you in the world, you know, we've got a chance that these people are gonna get the help that they need. So, thanks so much for talking to me about your experience. All the links are below this video of your GoFundMe and
okay,
yeah, all the other bits and pieces. So please, yeah, when you come back, please come back and talk to me in a few weeks about what you know what you found over there. And yeah, we'll try and get the word out and get these people the help that they need. And this is where the focus needs to be. Everybody, let's stop the wars. Let's help people who are suffering. Come on, this is what
100%.
we need.
What I will do as well, if it's okay with you, is I'll give you the link to my social media, just my Instagram account, because
They're all
I
underneath
will
here.
be I'll absolutely be documenting everything through my stories, you know, of us arriving there, the manufacture of the tents, the whole lot. So everyone will see. I mean, that's kind of my angle on this, that, you know, all this money you've given to these big charities, you don't really know where it's going to be siphoned off and into. It will help eventually, but we don't know. So our kind of angle is that you will see literally every single penny of what we raise go into those tents. As I say, I'm self-funding, I'm buying my own flights, sorting out my own accommodation. I've not asked anybody for a penny to support me, you know, while I'm going through all of this because I couldn't. You know, it has to go into these tents. That's it. It just has to. There's
Thank
no
you
other
so
place that
much.
needs to go.
Thank you
No
so much for
problem.
what you're doing, Pinner. I really appreciate you coming on to talk to me and to educate us as to what's going on over there. Thank you so much.
No problem. No problem at all. Thank you. Thank you for having me on your channel.
It was an
Thank
absolute
you.
it was an absolute pleasure.